The guard's hand tightened around the radio as the girl said her name, not whispered, not trembling. Clear enough to cut through the low murmur of the Hawthorne Country Club entrance. I'm here on behalf of the Parker Trust. For half a second, the world stalled. Then the laughter started. It wasn't loud at first. It crept in polite disbelieving, the kind of laugh people use when they think reality has made a mistake. A few heads turned. A couple of men in pressed navy blazers paused mid-step. Someone near the marble column snorted into their glass. The girl stood alone on the dark green runner carpet, shoulders squared, hands clasped in front of her. She couldn't have been more than 18. Slim. Brown skin. Hair pulled back tight, practical, no effort to soften it. She wore a simple grey cardigan over a white blouse, the fabric slightly wrinkled, like she'd sat too long on a bus seat. In her left hand, a thin leather folder. Worn. Real. Not decorative. The brass clock above the entrance read 1:57 in the afternoon. 3 minutes. William Hawthorne heard the name before he saw her. He turned slowly, irritation already blooming across his face. 57 years old, broad shoulders, perfect posture earned from a lifetime of being obeyed. His silver watch caught the light as he adjusted his cuff. The Parker Trust, he said, smiling without warmth. He stepped closer, stopping just short of her personal space. He looked her up and down, not quickly, not politely. He took his time, the way men like him always did. That trust hasn't sent anyone in years, he said. And when they did, it wasn't children. The word landed heavy. Deliberate. The girl's jaw tightened. Her eyes flicked just once toward the clock. 1:58. I'm not here to attend the meeting, she said. I'm here to be recorded as present. The guard shifted his weight. He glanced at the clipboard, then at Hawthorne, then back at the girl. His name badge read Thomas Reed, 22 years on the job. He'd seen drunk heirs, screaming divorces, quiet payoffs. This was new, Ma'am Reed said carefully. This area is restricted to members and invited representatives. She nodded. Slow. Controlled. That's why I'm here. Behind Hawthorne, a woman in pearls leaned toward her husband and murmured something. He smiled. A low ripple of amusement passed through the group gathering near the entrance. Not cruel. Worse. Dismissive. Hawthorne exhaled through his nose. Patient. Amused. Do you have any idea where you are? He asked. Yes. And you think you can just walk in here on a Saturday, minutes before a board vote, and claim I'm not claiming, she said. Her voice didn't rise. It sharpened. I'm invoking. That word did it. Hawthorne's smile faltered. Just a hairline crack. He didn't miss it himself, and it irritated him that he'd let it show. Invoking what exactly? She opened the folder. Not dramatically. No flourish. Just enough to reveal paper edges. Cream-colored. Heavy stock, old-fashioned, the kind that didn't come from home printers. The right to be acknowledged, she said. Before you proceed. Reed leaned in despite himself. He caught a glimpse of a seal, raised, embossed. His throat went dry. Hawthorne slapped the folder shut with 2 fingers. No. The sound echoed sharper than it should have. You don't get to disrupt this club with theatrics, Hawthorne said. Not today. The girl blinked. Once. Hard. I'm not here to disrupt anything, she said. I'm here to prevent something. Behind her calm, something cracked. Not visible. Internal. A pressure building behind her ribs. She could feel her heartbeat in her ears now. Loud. Unruly. She forced her breathing slow. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Her grandmother's voice lived there. Stay steady. Let them reveal themselves. Hawthorne leaned closer. You know, he said quietly, I knew Henry Parker. knew his kind of ambition. Smart man. But he understood his place. A murmur followed. Agreement disguised as nostalgia. This club has survived because we respect order, Hawthorne continued. Lineage, representation, continuity. He gestured at her cardigan. And nothing about you suggests continuity. The girl flinched before she could stop it. A flash. Gone as quickly as it came. But Reed saw it. So did the woman in pearls. So did Hawthorne. Good Hawthorne thought. She's just a kid. 1:59, someone muttered behind them. The doors to the main hall creaked open. A gust of warm air spilled out. Polished wood. Coffee. Leather. The sound of chairs shifting inside. The meeting was about to start. Reed cleared his throat. Mr. Hawthorne, perhaps we should call Mrs. Whitman. Let her decide. Hawthorne didn't turn. No, he said. Reed stiffened. The girl's hands curled into fists inside her sleeves. She felt the room closing in the unspoken pressure, the weight of being watched. She thought of her grandmother standing by the kitchen window that morning, pretending not to worry. She thought of the bus ride, the transfer, the last stop where the houses changed, and the sidewalks widened, and the trees grew older. I'm asking for a procedural hold, she said. Under the charter. Hawthorne laughed, this time out loud. The sound bounced off marble and brass. You read the charter? He asked. Yes. When I was 16. That earned a few raised eyebrows. Funny, Hawthorne said. Because the charter requires legal counsel. I have counsel, she said. They're on their way. That did it. Hawthorne's smile vanished. He stepped back, straightened his jacket, and raised his voice just enough for the group to hear. Thomas, he said, escort her out. Reed froze. Sir, she's trespassing, Hawthorne said, and delaying a lawful proceeding. The girl's chest tightened. This was it. The moment she'd feared and prepared for, and still wasn't ready to live inside. I'm not leaving, she said. Her voice shook now. She hated it. Not until you log my presence. Hawthorne's eyes hardened. Call the police, he said. The words landed like a slap. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, Jesus! The woman in pearls stiffened, suddenly uncomfortable. This was moving too fast. Reed stared at Hawthorne. So this isn't now. Reed lifted the radio with a hand that didn't quite stop shaking. The girl's breath hitched, her vision tunneled. The noise faded. She felt 12 again for a split second. Too small. Too alone. She reached into her pocket, fingers trembling, and pulled out her phone. Grandma, she whispered as it rang. They're calling the police. Hawthorne watched her satisfied, controlled. Behind him, unseen, a man with white hair and a cane paused just inside the open hall doors. He'd arrived early, as he always did. He'd heard the name. Parker. He turned his head slowly toward the entrance and stopped. The old man's cane struck the marble, once sharp and deliberate, and the sound cut through the rising tension like a gunshot. Robert Caldwell had not planned to intervene. At 85, he had learned the discipline of restraint. He had learned when to speak, and more importantly, when silence carried more weight. But the name Parker did something to him. It always had. It reached back, decades past, committees and charters and carefully worded minutes back, to smoke-filled rooms, and promises made when the club was still more dream than institution. He stepped forward. The crowd parted instinctively, not because they recognized him at first, but because authority has a way of bending space around itself. His back was slightly stooped, but his eyes were clear. Sharp. Still dangerous in the way only old men who have survived long enough can be. What's going on here? Caldwell asked. His voice was calm, no tremor, no confusion. William Hawthorne turned irritation already forming, then stopped short. His expression shifted fast and unguarded. Respect? Calculation? A flicker of something else? Fear, maybe? Or memory? Robert Hawthorne said, smoothing his tone. "You're early." Caldwell ignored the pleasantry. His gaze went past Hawthorne and settled on the girl. She was on the phone, shoulders hunched now, one hand pressed hard against her ribs, as if she were trying to hold herself together. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. Not yet. She listened, nodded, swallowed. Caldwell felt a tightness in his chest he hadn't felt in years. "Who is she?" he asked. Hawthorne laughed lightly, too lightly. "Some confused kid making a scene. Claims she's here on behalf of the Parker Trust." The words hung there. Caldwell didn't blink. He didn't smile. He didn't look amused. Instead, he turned fully toward the girl. "What's your name?" he asked her. She hesitated, still listening to the voice on the other end of the line. Then she spoke into the phone low. I know. I'll be okay." She ended the call hands, shaking as she slid the phone back into her pocket. She lifted her chin. "Emily Parker," she said. "Sir." Caldwell's grip tightened on his cane. Emily. Of course it was Emily. He studied her face now. Not the clothes, not the posture, the bone structure, the eyes, the way she held herself when she thought no one was on her side. He had seen that look before. On her grandfather. On himself once. Long ago. Henry's granddaughter Caldwell said quietly. Hawthorne scoffed. "Robert, come on. This is ridiculous." Caldwell didn't look at him. "How old are you, Emily Parker?" he asked. 18, she said. "I turned 18 3 months ago. And the trust, I'm the sole beneficiary," she said. "My grandmother has served as co-trustee until my birthday." A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Not laughter this time. Unease. Caldwell nodded slowly. "Do you have documentation?" Emily hesitated, then lifted the folder again. Her hands were steadier now. Not calm, but resolved. Before Hawthorne could object, Caldwell held up a hand. "Letter," he said. The folder opened. Papers slid into view, not waved, not thrust forward, just there. Patient. Unassuming. The kind of documents that didn't need theatrics to announce their importance. Caldwell leaned closer. Reed instinctively stepped aside to give him room. He didn't touch the papers. He didn't need to. He recognized the formatting, the language, the archaic phrasing that had never been modernized because no one had ever thought to challenge it. The Charter. The Trust Declaration. The amendment signed in 1972 in Henry Parker's unmistakable hand. Caldwell closed his eyes for a moment. Henry was meticulous, he said, mostly to himself. Drove the lawyers insane. He opened them again and looked straight at Hawthorne. "You are not authorized to proceed today without acknowledging the trust," Caldwell said. Hawthorne's jaw clenched. "With respect, Robert, the trust hasn't been represented in years." "We followed protocol." "No," Caldwell said. "You followed convenience." The word landed heavier than any insult. Hawthorne's face flushed. "This meeting has been scheduled for months. We cannot allow a last-minute disruption based on the appearance of the rightful heir," Caldwell cut in. "Which you chose to dismiss." Silence spread outward, thick, suffocating. From inside the hall chairs scraped. Voices rose. Someone was asking why the meeting hadn't started. Caldwell straightened. He turned to Reed. "Thomas," he said, "notify Eleanor Whitman that the Parker Trust has presented itself and requested procedural recognition." Reed swallowed. "Yes, sir." Hawthorne stepped forward. "Robert, this is unnecessary. We can handle this internally. That's exactly what you were trying to do, Caldwell said. Emily felt her knees weaken. The adrenaline that had held her upright began to leak out of her system, leaving exhaustion in its wake. She pressed her fingers into her palm, grounding herself. Breathe. Stay here. Caldwell noticed the sway. He noticed everything. Would you like to sit? He asked her. She shook her head. I'm okay. She wasn't. But standing felt like defiance, and defiance felt safer than collapse. Hawthorne glanced around, sensing the shift. The crowd no longer laughed. Phones were no longer raised with amusement. They were held still now. Recording, yes, but with caution. Eleanor Whitman appeared in the doorway, moments later, glasses in hand, irritation on her face that quickly faded when she took in the scene. Robert, she said. What's happening? Caldwell stepped aside, clearing the line of sight. This, he said, is Emily Parker. Whitman's gaze moved to the girl, took her in, assessed, calculated. She didn't smile. You should have told me, Whitman said to Hawthorne. I didn't think it was necessary, he replied. That's becoming clear, Whitman said. She turned back to Emily. You're requesting recognition under the charter, yes? Emily said. Her voice wavered. She steadied it. I'm not asking to speak. I'm asking you not to decide my family's future without me. Whitman nodded once. That is a reasonable request. Hawthorne's eyes widened. Eleanor. The meeting is paused, Whitman said. Immediately. She looked at Caldwell. We'll verify. Caldwell inclined his head. Of course. Reed exhaled a sound he hadn't realized he was holding. Emily's legs finally gave a little. She caught herself against the edge of the reception desk, fingers digging into polished wood. Caldwell noticed again. You did well, he said, quietly, so only she could hear. Her eyes filled despite herself. She blinked hard. They were going to erase us. They tried, Caldwell said. That's not the same thing. Behind them, Hawthorne stood very still, his face pale now, his confidence leaking away as the reality settled in. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This was exposure. Emily didn't look at him. She stared straight ahead at the open doors of the hall her grandfather had helped build, her heart pounding, not with fear now, but with something heavier, something colder. The knowledge that once the truth entered the room, nothing would ever be the same again. The boardroom doors closed with a muted thud, sealing the sound of the club behind them, and trapping everyone inside a space that had not changed in more than half a century. Dark mahogany walls, heavy drapes, a long table polished so carefully it reflected faces like water. Portraits of founding members stared down from their frames, oil eyes following every movement. The room smelled faintly of leather and old paper. Emily stood just inside the doorway, suddenly aware of how small she was, in a room built for men who never expected to be questioned. Eleanor Whitman took her seat at the head of the table, but did not signal for the meeting to begin. Instead, she removed her glasses and placed them carefully beside her folder. That alone unsettled people. Eleanor never removed her glasses unless something serious was about to happen. William Hawthorne sat 3 chairs to her right. His posture was rigid, too rigid. One hand lay flat on the table, fingers splayed as if anchoring himself. His other hand tapped once, then stopped. He noticed the tapping and forced it still. Robert Caldwell lowered himself into a chair opposite Hawthorne. He did not sit at the head. He never did any more. Power, he had learned, spoke louder when it appeared reluctant. Emily remained standing. You may sit, Eleanor said. Emily shook her head. I'd prefer to stand. No one challenged her. Eleanor nodded. Very well. Let the record reflect that Emily Parker is present and requesting procedural recognition as representative of the Parker Family Trust. A murmur rippled around the table. Not objection, surprise. Some of them had never heard the trust acknowledged aloud. Before we proceed, Eleanor continued, I want clarity. William, you were aware of the trust's protections under the original charter. Hawthorne straightened. I was aware the trust existed. I was not aware it had an active representative. You didn't ask, Caldwell said. Hawthorne turned sharply. With respect, Robert, this is not about asking. This is about governance. The club cannot be held hostage by a dormant interest. Emily felt the word hit her like a slap. Dormant, as if her family were a closed file, a forgotten account. It wasn't dormant, she said quietly. It was waiting. Hawthorne's mouth tightened. Waiting is not participation. Waiting was required, Emily said. Her voice trembled, then steadied. I was a minor. My grandmother followed the trust exactly as written. No early assumption of power. No shortcuts. Eleanor's gaze sharpened. Your grandmother? Yes, Emily said. Margaret Parker. She's been co-trustee since my parents died. Several heads turned. That detail was new to some of them. Eleanor flipped a page in her folder. Our correspondence was addressed to the trust's registered contact. My grandmother received every letter, Emily said. She chose not to respond until I could stand here myself. Hawthorne laughed under his breath. That's convenient. Emily looked at him then. Really looked at him. Her eyes were dark, steady, unblinking. What's convenient, she said, is assuming silence means absence. The room went still. Caldwell watched Hawthorne carefully now. Not as an adversary, as a man watching another man realize he might have miscalculated the size of the ground beneath his feet. Eleanor folded her hands. We were prepared to vote on a structural change today. I know, Emily said. You know the implications, Eleanor pressed. Yes. And you chose today to appear. Yes. Hawthorne leaned forward. You waited until the last possible moment. Emily didn't deny it, because the last possible moment is the only one that matters when someone is about to take something that doesn't belong to them. A few members shifted in their chairs. Uncomfortable, not offended, exposed. Eleanor studied Emily for a long moment. You understand that recognition does not guarantee influence. I understand, Emily said. It guarantees fairness. Hawthorne scoffed. Fairness is not the same as experience. No, Emily agreed. It's harder. That earned a sharp inhale from someone near the far end of the table. Eleanor glanced at Caldwell. Robert, you've reviewed the documents. Yes, he said. They're authentic. Hawthorne's head snapped up. Already I don't need a forensic lab to recognize Henry Parker's handwriting, Caldwell said. Or his legal foresight. Eleanor nodded. Then the trust must be acknowledged. Hawthorne's jaw clenched. Acknowledged how Eleanor's voice was even. By delaying the vote. The words landed like a dropped plate. That's unacceptable, Hawthorne said. We have quorum, we have counsel. We have an obligation, Eleanor cut in. One that predates you, and me. Hawthorne looked around the table searching for support. He found only averted eyes, tight expressions, calculating silence. Emily's knees shook. She locked them. She refused to let herself sway again. This isn't personal, Hawthorne said finally, his voice lower now. Controlled. This is about the survival of the club. My grandfather built this club when men like you wouldn't let him through the front door, Emily said. Her voice broke. Just for a second. She swallowed. If this place can't survive honoring its own promises, then maybe it doesn't deserve to. The word maybe hung in the air, daring someone to challenge it. Eleanor exhaled slowly. The vote is tabled. Hawthorne's face drained of colour. We will reconvene once the Trust's representation has been formally entered into the record, Eleanor continued. Effective immediately. A gavel struck wood. Final. Irrevocable. Hawthorne stood abruptly. His chair scraped loud against the floor. This is a mistake, he said. You're letting sentiment override reason. No, Eleanor said. We're letting reason catch up. Hawthorne turned toward Emily, his eyes sharp with something that bordered on desperation. You have no idea what you've started. Emily met his gaze. Her voice was quiet. Neither did you. He left the room without another word. The door closed behind him, and with it went the last illusion of control. Emily's breath came out in a rush she hadn't realized she was holding. Her hands shook now openly. She pressed them together, knuckles white. Caldwell rose slowly and approached her. You should sit, he said gently. This time she did. The leather chair creaked beneath her weight. The seat was warm, as if someone else had just vacated it. She wondered who had sat there last, who had spoken for her family while believing they were gone. Eleanor looked down the table. We'll adjourn for now. Chairs moved, papers shuffled. No one spoke to Emily directly as they filed out. Not yet. This was not an ending. It was a threshold. When the room finally emptied, only Eleanor and Caldwell remained with her. Eleanor removed her glasses again. You understand this will not be easy. Emily nodded. Tears slid down her cheeks, silent, unstoppable. I didn't come here for easy. Caldwell smiled faintly. Henry would have liked you. Emily laughed once, broken and breathless. I hope so. Outside the boardroom, the club hummed back to life, unaware that something fundamental had shifted. Inside, Emily Parker sat in a chair her family had earned, her heart, still racing her future, suddenly vast and terrifying, and far from finished. The hallway outside the boardroom smelled faintly of lemon polish and old carpet, a scent Emily would later associate with the moment her life split into before and after. She stepped out slowly, legs still unsteady, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on her shoulders in ways she didn't yet know how to name. The doors closed behind her with a soft click. Not dramatic, not final, just enough to mark separation. The club resumed its rhythm almost immediately. Laughter drifted from the lounge. Ice chimed in glasses. Somewhere down the corridor, a phone rang and went unanswered. Hawthorne Country Club did not pause for revelations. It absorbed them, or tried to. Emily stopped near the tall windows overlooking the east lawn. Sunlight cut across the polished floor in long rectangular bands. Outside, members strolled past the hedges, unaware that a vote meant to erase a family had just been stopped cold. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. She didn't need to check the name. She already knew. Did they throw you out? Margaret Parker asked the moment Emily answered. Her voice was calm, but only because decades of practice had taught her how to hold fear in check. No, Emily said. Her voice cracked on the word. She cleared her throat. They paused everything. There was a breath on the other end. Long. Controlled. Are you safe? Yes. Are you alone? Emily glanced down the hall. Eleanor Whitman stood a few yards away, speaking quietly to an aide. Robert Caldwell sat on a bench beneath a portrait hands, folded over his cane, watching the floor as if it might confess something to him. No, Emily said. I'm not. Good, Margaret said. Then listen to me. What you did today was enough. Whatever happens next, you don't owe them anything else. Emily swallowed. They were going to take it, Grandma. They were so sure I wouldn't show up. I know, Margaret said softly. They always are. Emily leaned her forehead against the glass. It was cool, solid, real. She focused on that sensation, grounding herself in something that didn't argue back. I'm tired, she admitted. You should be, Margaret said. You stood in front of men who've never been told no, and said it anyway. The call ended quietly. No dramatic farewell. Just trust. Emily slid the phone away and straightened. Eleanor approached, then footsteps measured heels, clicking with authority that didn't need to announce itself. Up close, she looked older than Emily had expected. Not fragile, weathered. Lines carved deep by decisions that couldn't be undone. You handled yourself well, Eleanor said. Emily didn't answer right away. Compliments felt strange now. Unstable. You didn't have to stop the meeting, she said instead. Eleanor studied her. Yes, I did. Because of the charter, Emily said. Because of the charter, Eleanor agreed. And because I've seen this happen before. Emily turned. Before Eleanor's mouth tightened. Different family, same assumptions. They didn't fight. They left quietly. I've regretted that for years. Emily absorbed that, filed it away. Regret lingered longer than anger. She was learning that quickly. Down the hall, a door opened sharply. William Hawthorne emerged from a side corridor jacket already off-tie, loosened. His face was pale now, the colour leached from it, as if by force. He stopped when he saw Emily standing there. For a moment, something like disbelief crossed his features. Not rage, not fear, disorientation. This isn't over, he said. Eleanor turned before Emily could respond. No, she said evenly. It isn't. Hawthorne ignored her. His eyes stayed locked on Emily. You think you won because you delayed a vote? I didn't win anything, Emily said. Her voice surprised her with its steadiness. I stopped you from pretending I don't exist. Hawthorne scoffed. You think this club will accept you? Emily didn't answer right away. She looked past him down the hall at the portraits lining the walls. Faces of men who had built power by assuming it was theirs to keep. Her grandfather's portrait hung among them. Quiet. Resolute. I'm not asking to be accepted, she said. I'm asking you to follow your own rules. Hawthorne's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Rules are written by people who understand the consequences of enforcing them. Emily met his gaze. Then maybe it's time you learned. Something flickered in his eyes then. Not contempt. Recognition. The realization that the ground had shifted under his feet and would not shift back. He turned away without another word. Robert Caldwell watched him go, his expression unreadable. That man, Caldwell said quietly once Hawthorne was gone, has confused control with permanence for a very long time. Emily looked at him. What happens now? Caldwell smiled faintly. Now people start checking records they've avoided checking for years, as if summoned by the words, a younger man in a grey suit hurried down the hall tablet, clutched to his chest. Legal counsel. Nervous, sweat beading at his temple. Mrs. Whitman, he said, breathless. We've pulled the archived trust filings. There are some irregularities. Eleanor's expression hardened. Go on. The Parker Trust was flagged internally for review 8 years ago, he said. But the review was never completed. The request was closed. By whom? Eleanor asked. The man hesitated, then swallowed. By William Hawthorne. Emily felt the room tilt, just slightly, enough to know this wasn't just about today. Eleanor exhaled slowly. Prepare a full audit. Immediately. The man nodded and hurried off. Emily stared at the floor. Her hands trembled again. This time not from fear, but from the dawning understanding that what she had walked into was bigger than a meeting, bigger than a vote. "You didn't know," Caldwell said gently. "No," Emily whispered. "I didn't." Eleanor placed a hand on her shoulder. Firm, grounding. "You opened a door. You don't have to walk through it alone." Outside, thunder rolled low across the horizon, distant, ominous. The sky beyond the windows darkened, clouds gathering over the manicured lawns. Emily straightened, drawing in a breath that tasted like something new. Not victory, not relief. Resolve. She glanced once more at her grandfather's portrait. "I'm still here," she murmured. "I didn't let them erase us." The storm outside crept closer, slow and inevitable, as Hawthorne Country Club carried on with its afternoon rituals, unaware that the quiet girl who had walked in with a worn leather folder had just set something in motion that would not stop. Not now. Not ever. By evening, the storm finally broke. Rain hammered the slate roof of Hawthorne Country Club, loud enough to drown out conversation in the bar, sharp enough to rattle the tall windows that had watched over decades of quiet deals and polite betrayals. Members lingered longer than usual, nursing drinks, pretending nothing had changed, while underneath the rituals a nervous energy crept through the building. Emily sat alone in the small conference room Eleanor had assigned her, a space usually reserved for committee overflow. A single lamp cast a warm circle of light on the table. Her leather folder lay open in front of her, papers spread carefully, as if arranging them might somehow steady her thoughts. Her hands still shook. Not visibly. Not enough for anyone else to notice. But inside, everything felt loose, unanchored. The adrenaline that had carried her through the afternoon had burned off, leaving behind a hollow ache that spread from her chest to her throat. She hadn't eaten. She hadn't noticed until now. The door opened softly. Margaret Parker stepped inside, rain clinging to the hem of her coat, silver hair damp at the temples. She closed the door behind her and stood there for a moment, just looking at her granddaughter. Emily rose so fast her chair scraped the floor. "Grandma." Margaret crossed the room in 3 quick steps and pulled Emily into her arms. Tight. Fierce. No words at first. Just the solid pressure of someone who had spent a lifetime holding herself together for others and would not let go now. "They called me Margaret," said, quietly against Emily's hair. "Security." Then Eleanor herself. Emily laughed weakly. "That's new." Margaret pulled back, cupping Emily's face, her eyes searching every inch. "Did they touch you?" "No," Emily said. "Not like that." Margaret nodded, satisfied for now. She turned her gaze to the table, to the documents, to the familiar names printed in ink that had once terrified her. So Margaret said, "You finally forced them to say our name out loud." Emily sat back down, suddenly exhausted. "I didn't plan to." "You never do," Margaret said, taking the chair beside her. "That's how I know you're honest." The rain intensified, drumming harder, louder. Somewhere in the building a door slammed. Margaret reached into her bag and placed a thick envelope on the table. "What's that?" Emily asked. "The part I hoped you'd never have to see," Margaret said. Emily hesitated, then opened it. Inside were copies. Letters, emails, internal memos marked confidential, dates stretching back nearly a decade, names repeated. Hawthorne's name appeared more than once. So did Eleanor's. So did others Emily had seen around the table. Emily's stomach dropped. They knew she whispered. They suspected Margaret corrected. That's different. Suspicion is easy to ignore. Confirmation is inconvenient. Emily flipped through the pages, heart pounding harder with every line. Requests to review trust authority. Delays justified by procedural ambiguity. Meetings rescheduled. Reviews quietly closed. They weren't just waiting for me to disappear, Emily said. They were counting on it. Margaret nodded. Time is very kind to people who benefit from silence. A knock sounded at the door. Eleanor entered, raincoat draped over one arm, expression grave. She stopped when she saw the envelope. "So you have it?" she said. Margaret met her gaze without flinching. "We always did." Eleanor closed the door behind her. "Then you understand why this can't be handled quietly." Emily looked up. "You knew." Eleanor didn't deny it. "I knew enough to be uncomfortable. Not enough to act. That's not an excuse," Emily said. Her voice was steady, but her hands tightened on the paper. "No," Eleanor agreed. "It's a confession." Silence settled between them, thick and heavy. Outside, thunder cracked close, now no longer distant. Eleanor straightened. "The audit will uncover more. It always does. But audits take time. And William Hawthorne will not wait quietly." As if summoned by the name, voices rose in the hallway. Sharp, heated. The door swung open without another knock. William Hawthorne stood there, rain-soaked hair plastered to his forehead. Composure finally cracked. His eyes flicked to Margaret, then to the envelope on the table. "So it's true," he said. "You brought her." Margaret stood slowly. "She brought herself." Hawthorne laughed, brittle. "You hid her." "I protected her," Margaret replied. "From men like you." Hawthorne stepped fully into the room, rainwater pooling at his feet. "You think this ends with a delayed vote and a feel-good story? You have no idea what you're unraveling." Emily stood. Her heart raced, but her voice did not betray it. "Then stop pulling." Hawthorne turned on her, anger flaring. "You don't get to lecture me. I built my life on this place." "You built it on exclusion," Emily said. "There's a difference." Hawthorne sneered. "Your grandfather understood compromise." Margaret's voice cut through the room like steel. "My husband understood survival." Hawthorne froze. Eleanor stepped between them. "William, this conversation is over." "No," Hawthorne snapped. "It's just beginning." He pointed at the envelope. "You release that you destroy more than me. Donors, members, families." Emily felt the weight of it then. Not fear. Responsibility. "Good," she said quietly. "They should know." Hawthorne stared at her, stunned. For the first time since she'd arrived, he looked at her not as a nuisance, not as an obstacle, but as a threat. "You really are his granddaughter," he said. Margaret placed a hand on Emily's back, steadying, proud. Hawthorne backed toward the door, jaw tight. "This isn't finished." Eleanor met his glare. "No, it's finally started." He left without another word, the door slamming behind him hard enough to make the lamp flicker. For a long moment, no one spoke. Emily sank back into her chair, the fight draining from her all at once. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "All of it." Margaret squeezed her shoulder. "Neither did your grandfather. He learned by refusing to quit." Eleanor gathered her coat. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be worse." Emily let out a soft, incredulous laugh. "That's comforting." Eleanor allowed herself a thin smile. "I'm not here to comfort you. I'm here to stand with you." When Eleanor left, the room felt smaller, quieter. The storm outside softened to a steady rain. Emily closed the folder and pressed her palms flat against it, grounding herself once more. "I was so scared," she said to Margaret. Margaret leaned close. "You still are." Emily nodded. "But I'm not running." Margaret smiled, tired and fierce. "Then neither am I." Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the portraits lining the hall. Faces that had once believed themselves untouchable stared back at the darkness, unaware that the storm they had ignored for years had finally found its way inside. Morning arrived without apology. The storm had scrubbed the sky clean, leaving behind a pale, unforgiving light that spilled through the tall windows of Hawthorne Country Club and exposed every fingerprint, every scuff, every crack people preferred not to notice. Emily stood at the window of the small conference room, coffee cooling untouched beside her, watching groundskeepers rake leaves, as if order could be restored with enough repetition. Her phone buzzed for the 4th time in 10 minutes. She didn't answer it. Margaret entered quietly, coat already on hair pinned with careful precision. She looked smaller this morning, not weaker, just worn thin by a night of listening to her granddaughter breathe through panic she pretended not to feel. "You should eat," Margaret said. Emily shook her head. "Later?" Margaret didn't argue. She had learned when to push and when to wait. She set a folded newspaper on the table instead. The headline stared back in thick black letters. "Local club delays. Vote amid dispute over family trust." Emily closed her eyes. "So it's out," she said. "It was always going to be," Margaret replied. The only question was, who would tell it? Emily scanned the article quickly. Neutral tone. No names yet. Just hints. Enough to make people curious. Enough to make powerful people nervous. A knock interrupted them. Eleanor Whitman entered with 2 men Emily hadn't seen before. Both wore conservative suits. Neither carried themselves like club members. These men moved differently, purposefully. One carried a slim briefcase, the other a tablet. "This is Daniel Pierce and Thomas Alvarez," Eleanor said. "Outside counsel." Emily nodded politely. Pierce wasted no time. "We've reviewed the preliminary audit request. It's extensive." "That's the point," Margaret said. Pierce glanced at her, assessing. "Mrs. Parker, once we proceed, there will be consequences beyond the club." Emily met his gaze. "For whom? For everyone," Pierce said. "Including you." Emily exhaled slowly. "I didn't come here to protect people who ignored the rules." Alvarez leaned forward. "We uncovered something overnight." Eleanor stiffened. "That was fast." "Someone wanted us to find it," Alvarez said. "An internal memo. Buried. Never officially filed." He turned the tablet towards them. The words blurred together at first, then sharpened. "Recommendation. Maintain status quo. Delay trust. Recognition until beneficiary maturity. Risk assessment acceptable." Emily's throat tightened. "They planned to wait me out," she said. Margaret's jaw clenched. They planned to erase her. Pierce nodded. The memo was authored by Hawthorne, approved informally by 2 other board members. Eleanor's face went pale. Names. Alvarez listed them. Emily recognized both. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, something hard had settled behind them. "Prepare formal notices. Effective immediately." Emily's phone buzzed again. She checked it this time. Unknown number. She answered. "Emily Parker?" a man asked. His voice was calm, professional. "Yes. This is Detective Samuel Brooks with the State Attorney's Office. I'd like to speak with you regarding a potential civil matter." Emily's pulse spiked. Margaret reached for her hand. "Yes," Emily said. "I'm available." Brooks continued. "We've received an inquiry concerning delayed fiduciary recognition and possible misuse of authority. I'll be brief. Have you been contacted by anyone asking you to withdraw your claim?" Emily's gaze flicked to Eleanor. "No," she said. "Not directly." Good, Brooks replied. "If that changes, you need to tell us immediately." The call ended. Silence filled the room. "They're watching now," Eleanor said. Yes, Pierce agreed. Which means Hawthorne is under pressure. As if summoned voices rose in the hallway again. This time sharper, angry. The door opened, and a woman stormed in without waiting to be invited. Late 40s. Perfect hair, eyes blazing. "My husband is being dragged through the mud," she snapped. "And I want to know why." Eleanor stood. "Mrs. Hawthorne, this is not the time. Oh, I think it is the woman," shot back. "You humiliated him yesterday. Now there's an investigation. Reporters calling our house." Emily stood slowly. Her legs felt steadier now. Anger had replaced fear. "Your husband humiliated himself," Emily said. Mrs. Hawthorne turned on her. "You have no idea what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," Emily replied. "I'm telling the truth." Mrs. Hawthorne laughed, sharp and humorless. "Truth doesn't protect you from consequences." Margaret stepped forward then. Her voice was quiet, controlled. "Neither does privilege." The woman stared at her, stunned. Then she looked back at Emily. Really looked, and something shifted. Not sympathy. Recognition. "You won't win," Mrs. Hawthorne said softly. "Men like my husband don't lose quietly." Emily held her gaze. "Then neither do women like me." Mrs. Hawthorne left without another word. Eleanor exhaled. That was inevitable. Pierce closed his briefcase. "We recommend filing for an injunction." "Today." Emily nodded. "Do it." By noon, the club buzzed like a disturbed hive. Members whispered. Staff avoided eye contact. Phones rang, unanswered. The illusion of control cracked. Emily stepped outside for air. The lawn stretched wide and green, deceptively peaceful. She sat on a stone bench, hands clasped tightly in her lap. She thought of school, of friends who had no idea where she was or what she was fighting, of the life she might have had if silence had been easier. Footsteps approached. Robert Caldwell lowered himself onto the bench beside her. "You look like your grandfather did when he realized the cost of standing his ground." Emily smiled faintly. "Did he ever regret it?" Caldwell shook his head. "He regretted the people who made it necessary." Emily stared out at the horizon. "I'm scared," Good Caldwell said. "Fear means you understand the stakes." She nodded. "What if this destroys the club?" Caldwell chuckled softly. "Clubs don't matter. People do." Inside, Eleanor's voice carried faintly through an open window. "Orders. Decisions." No hesitation now. Emily rose. "I'm ready," she said. Caldwell looked up at her, pride unmistakable. "So am I." As she walked back toward the building, Emily felt it then. Not the weight of history pressing down, but the strange, terrifying lift of possibility. The sense that something rotten was finally being dragged into the light, and that once exposed it would not survive. The injunction hit at 2:12 in the afternoon. Emily was standing near the reception desk when Eleanor's phone vibrated the sound, sharp and insistent in the quiet that had settled over the club like a held breath. Eleanor glanced at the screen, then at Daniel Pierce, who was already nodding before she spoke. "It's granted," Eleanor said. The words didn't explode. They didn't echo. They landed softly, decisively, like a lock clicking into place. Emily felt it in her chest before her mind caught up. A sudden lightness, not relief, something more dangerous, momentum. Pierce closed his laptop, effective immediately. No asset transfers, no structural changes, no board action affecting the Parker Trust without court oversight. Margaret let out a breath she had been holding since the night before. She reached for Emily's hand, squeezing, once firm and grounding. "It's real," Margaret said. Emily nodded, eyes fixed on the polished floor. "I know." The club reacted slowly at first. That was always its way. Old institutions didn't panic. They absorbed shocks, tested them, tried to outlast them. But cracks were already forming. A waiter hurried past, too quickly, nearly colliding with a member who snapped in irritation. A phone rang behind the bar and went unanswered. Conversation stopped mid-sentence when Emily walked by, then resumed in whispers once she passed. She felt every stare, every pause, every recalibration. William Hawthorne had not returned. Instead, his absence moved through the building like a rumor with teeth. By mid-afternoon, reporters gathered beyond the gates, not shouting, not pushing, just waiting. Cameras mounted on tripods, notepads out. The kind of patience that came from knowing something would eventually break. Eleanor watched them from the window of her office. "He's calling everyone he knows," she said, trying to contain it. Emily stood beside her, arms folded tight across her chest. "Contain what?" "The truth," Eleanor replied. A knock came at the door. Thomas Reed stepped in posture, stiff. "Ma'am, there's a situation in the dining room." Eleanor sighed. "Of course there is." They found Mrs. Hawthorne standing near the long windows, voice low, but cutting, surrounded by a small cluster of members who pretended not to be listening. "This is what happens when you let outsiders rewrite tradition," she was saying. "One person makes a scene, and suddenly decades of stability are under threat." Emily stopped a few feet away. Margaret reached for her arm, but Emily gently shook her head. "I didn't make a scene," Emily said. Mrs. Hawthorne turned, startled, then composed herself instantly. "I wasn't speaking to you. You were speaking about me," Emily replied. "That makes it my conversation." The room stilled. Forks paused. Glasses hovered mid-air. Mrs. Hawthorne smiled thinly. "You think this ends well for you?" "I think it ends." "Honestly," Emily said. A man near the window cleared his throat. William always said the trust was inactive. Emily looked at him. Really looked. "Did you ever ask why?" The man looked away. Mrs. Hawthorne scoffed. "You're naive if you think exposure leads to reform." Emily's voice was quiet. "I'm not here to reform you. I'm here to stop you." That landed harder than any accusation. Mrs. Hawthorne's eyes flashed. "You have no allies here." Emily didn't flinch. "I don't need your permission to exist." Margaret stepped forward, then placing herself just slightly between Emily and the woman. Not confrontational. Protective. "This club was built by men who believed rules mattered," Margaret said. "If you're uncomfortable with them being enforced, that's not Emily's fault." Mrs. Hawthorne's smile vanished. "You raised her to destroy." Margaret's voice softened. "I raised her to survive." Mrs. Hawthorne turned and walked away, heels striking the floor with controlled fury. The dining room exhaled. Later, alone in the small conference room, again Emily stared at her reflection in the darkened window. She barely recognized the girl looking back. Same face, same eyes. But something in her posture had changed. Straightened. Settled. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. "Emily Parker," a man said. "This is James Keller. I sit on the board." Emily closed her eyes briefly. "Yes. I owe you an apology," Keller said, "and a confession." Her pulse quickened. "I'm listening." "We voted on an internal motion 3 years ago," Keller continued, "to quietly reclassify dormant trusts. William pushed it through committee without full disclosure." I didn't stop him. Emily leaned back in her chair, the weight of it pressing into her spine. "Why are you telling me now?" "Because I don't want to be on the wrong side of this anymore," Keller said. "And because there are emails. If you need them." Emily said nothing for a long moment. "Then send them to my counsel." The call ended. Emily stared at the wall, heart racing. Not fear now. Recognition. This was how it happened. Not with one dramatic villain, but with a series of small, cowardly decisions. People choosing comfort over courage, until comfort became cruelty. Robert Caldwell found her there, an hour later, sitting cross-legged on the floor. Shoes, kicked aside papers, spread around her like fallen leaves. "You look like you're mapping a war," he said. Emily glanced up. "It feels like one." Caldwell lowered himself into a chair. "It's worse. Wars end." Emily huffed a tired laugh. "You're not helping." He smiled. "You're doing something rare. You're forcing people to confront who they've been." Emily gathered the papers into a neat stack. "I didn't want this." "No one ever does," Caldwell said. "But wanting has never been a prerequisite for leadership." Emily met his gaze. "What if I fail?" Caldwell considered. "Then you'll fail having told the truth. That's more than most manage." As evening crept in, the club quieted again. Members departed early. Staff spoke in hushed tones. Outside, the reporters remained patient as ever. Emily stepped out onto the front steps just long enough to breathe the cool air. Cameras lifted instantly. Voices called her name. She didn't stop. Not yet. Inside, Eleanor waited with Pierce and Alvarez, stacks of documents growing taller by the hour. The machine was in motion now. Slow. Relentless. Emily returned to the conference room and sat down beside her grandmother. "I didn't think people would start talking so fast," Emily said. Margaret smiled sadly. Secrets always know when they're about to die. Emily rested her head briefly against Margaret's shoulder, allowing herself a moment of stillness. Just a moment. Then she straightened. "Let them talk," she said. Outside, the lights of the club glowed against the deepening dusk, a beacon of old power flickering under scrutiny. And somewhere beyond the gates, the story was already spreading, carried by people who had waited years for someone to say enough. Emily Parker sat quietly at the center of it all, understanding now that this was no longer about reclaiming a name. It was about deciding what that name would mean when the dust finally settled. The first arrest did not happen at the club. It happened 40 miles south in a glass office overlooking the harbor, where William Hawthorne had convinced himself he still controlled the narrative. Emily learned about it from Eleanor, not from the news. "He's been taken in for questioning," Eleanor said. Voice low, door closed. "State Attorney's office. Voluntary for now." Emily felt the words land in her body like a change in air pressure. Not relief, not triumph. A tightening. The sense that the story had crossed a line and could not be pulled back. For what Emily asked. Eleanor hesitated. Financial misrepresentation, obstruction. There are emails, transfers, shell committees that never met. It's broader than the trust. Margaret closed her eyes. It always is. By noon, the reporters knew. By 1, the footage ran on loop. Hawthorne's name crawled across screens beneath phrases like internal inquiry and possible misuse of authority. His face appeared once caught by a long lens as he entered the building, jaw-clenched eyes forward, the practiced expression of a man who believed composure could substitute for innocence. Emily watched none of it. She sat with Pierce and Alvarez in the conference room, listening as they outlined what came next. Depositions, timelines, a cascade of people who would suddenly remember conversations they had chosen to forget. "Someone will try to make you the story," Pierce said. "They'll want sound bites, reactions." Emily nodded. "I won't give them any." "Good," Alvarez said. "Let the documents talk." The club felt different now, not quieter, louder somehow with tension. Staff moved carefully, as if any sudden sound might shatter something fragile. Members avoided the windows. A few resigned, outright leaving envelopes at reception with stiff, formal notes about reputational risk. Others stayed, watched, calculated. Emily crossed paths with one of them near the stairwell, a man in his late 60s with a familiar face and unfamiliar resolve. "Miss Parker," he said, stopping her. "I served on the finance committee." Emily waited. "We signed off on things we didn't fully review," he admitted, "because William told us they were routine." "Did you believe him?" Emily asked. The man swallowed. "I wanted to." She nodded. "That's not the same thing." He didn't argue. That afternoon, Emily finally stepped outside. The reporters surged forward, questions overlapping, cameras clicking. Her name cut through the noise again and again. She raised a hand, not to speak, to slow them. "I'll make a statement tomorrow," she said. "Not today." They pressed anyway. "Did you expect this outcome? Are you satisfied? Do you feel vindicated?" Emily looked at them. Really looked. The urgency in their faces. The hunger. The need to shape her into something simple. "I feel responsible," she said. "That's all." She turned and went back inside before anyone could ask what that meant. That night, sleep came in fragments. Emily dreamed of her grandfather's portrait, the eyes following her down endless corridors. She woke with her heart racing, the echo of voices in her ears, the sense of being watched by something larger than any one person. Margaret found her in the kitchen at dawn, standing barefoot on the cold tile, staring at nothing. "You don't have to be strong all the time," Margaret said. Emily laughed softly. "I don't know how to turn it off." Margaret poured coffee. "You don't. You just learn when to set it down." By mid-morning, the second shoe dropped. Daniel Pierce entered the conference room with his phone already in hand. "Federal interest," he said. "White-collar unit. They're looking at patterns." Eleanor's shoulders sagged. "How far back? Long enough to make people nervous," Pierce said. Emily closed her eyes briefly. The image of Hawthorne alone in that glass office rose unbidden. She felt no pity, only a distant sadness for the wasted years. News broke again. Then again, former committee members issued statements, carefully worded, regret without responsibility, surprise without accountability, each one read like a mirror of the last. Emily didn't comment. Instead, she sat with Caldwell in the lounge, late that afternoon, the room empty, fire unlit. He watched her the way one watches someone standing on the edge of a long road. "You've done what you came to do," he said. "You could walk away." Emily shook her head. "Not yet." Caldwell nodded. "That answer will cost you." "I know." He smiled faintly. "Henry used to say the price of integrity is paid in advance." Emily smiled back. "He sounds exhausting." He was Caldwell agreed, and worth it. By evening, Hawthorne's attorney released a statement. No admission, full cooperation, confidence in due process. Emily read it once, then set it aside. The call came just after dinner. "Miss Parker," the voice said. Calm. Measured. "This is Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Lynn." Emily's pulse quickened. "Yes. We're assembling a case," Lynn said. "And we'd like to speak with you." Emily glanced at Margaret, who nodded once, when Emily asked. "Tomorrow morning," Lynn replied, "there are things only you can clarify." The line went dead. Emily sat very still. This was it. The moment where principle became testimony, where standing her ground would no longer be symbolic but personal. Margaret reached for her hand. "Whatever you decide, I'll go," Emily said. Margaret searched her face. You don't owe them your voice. Emily squeezed her hand. I owe myself the truth. That night the club stood dark and quiet, its lights dimmed, its halls emptied. Outside, the reporters finally dispersed, chasing new angles, new leads. Inside, Emily packed her folder carefully. Not because she needed it now, because it reminded her who she was when she first walked through those doors. A girl with a name no one wanted to hear. A truth no one wanted to verify. She lay awake long after the house had settled, listening to the soft sounds of Margaret's breathing from the next room. Tomorrow would be different, harder, quieter in some ways, louder in others. As sleep finally pulled her under, Emily understood something with startling clarity. Power didn't reveal itself in grand speeches or public apologies. It showed up in small rooms under oath when no cameras were rolling, and tomorrow she would step into one of those rooms and speak anyway. The federal building smelled like disinfectant and old paper, a sterile blend that made everything feel smaller than it was. Emily sat in the waiting area with her hands folded in her lap, the leather folder resting against her knees, out of habit more than necessity. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A clock on the wall ticked too loudly. 10:30 in the morning. She had arrived early. She always did. Margaret sat beside her back, straight purse, clasped tightly, eyes forward. She had insisted on coming not to speak, not to interfere, but to witness. There were moments in a life that demanded witnesses. A door opened. Emily Parker, a woman said. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Lynn was younger than Emily expected. Early 40s, maybe. Hair pulled back. No wasted movement. Her eyes held the kind of focus that came from long hours and difficult cases. This way, Lynn said. The room beyond was small. No windows. A table. 3 chairs. A recorder already running. 2 men sat against the wall, suits, rumpled expressions neutral. Federal agents. Observers, silent by design. Lynn gestured for Emily to sit. Emily did. Margaret remained outside. Before we begin, Lynn said, I need to make something clear. You are not under investigation. You are a witness. Emily nodded. I understand. Lynn studied her for a moment longer than necessary. If at any point you need a break, say so. Emily met her gaze. I'm okay. Lynn pressed a button on the recorder. For the record, please state your name, Emily Parker, and your relationship to the Parker Family Trust. I'm the sole beneficiary and legal representative as of my 18th birthday. Lynn nodded. Let's start at the beginning. The questions came steadily. Not aggressive, not gentle, precise. Dates, letters, meetings, who contacted whom, what was said, what was not said. Emily answered carefully, her voice steady, even when the memories tugged at her chest. When did you first suspect the trust was being mishandled? Lynn asked. Emily hesitated. I didn't. Not really. I thought it was neglect, not intention. And when did that change? The day I walked into the club and realized they had already decided who I was before I opened my mouth. Lynn watched her closely. How did that make you feel? Emily paused. The question caught her off guard. It wasn't about documents. It wasn't about procedure. It made me feel invisible, she said, finally. And then it made me angry. Lynn nodded once. Anger can be clarifying. Emily almost smiled. They moved on. Emails were read aloud. Memos. Language that danced around intent without ever naming it. Phrases like operational efficiency and long-term stability. Words that hid decisions behind professionalism. Did William Hawthorne ever contact you directly? Lynn asked. No. Did anyone attempt to dissuade you from pursuing recognition? Emily thought of Mrs. Hawthorne's eyes, of the warning in her voice. Not explicitly, but implicitly. Yes. Lynn leaned back. That's often how these things work. The session lasted longer than Emily expected. Hours blurred together. At some point, water appeared at her elbow. At another, the clock ticked past noon, without anyone acknowledging it. When it ended, Lynn switched off the recorder. "You did well," she said. Emily exhaled. "Is that enough?" Lynn's expression softened. "Just a fraction. It's more than enough. It's necessary." Emily stood leg stiff, heart pounding again, now that the room had released her. Margaret rose from her chair in the hallway as soon as the door opened. She didn't ask questions. She simply wrapped an arm around Emily's shoulders and held her there firm and steady. "You were brave," Margaret said. Emily closed her eyes. "I was honest." They left the building quietly, slipping past reporters who had gathered outside, their questions shouted into the cold air. Emily didn't slow. She didn't look back. By late afternoon, the news broke. Formal charges, financial misconduct, abuse of authority, obstruction. The language was clinical. The implications were not. William Hawthorne's photograph appeared everywhere. The confident smile replaced by a tight, unsmiling stare taken years earlier. The caption beneath it did not mention Emily's name. Not yet. That evening, Emily returned to the club one last time. Not for a meeting, not for a confrontation, just to walk the halls while they were still hers. The building was quiet, emptied of members and noise. Staff moved softly, respectful now, in a way that felt complicated. Some nodded as she passed. Some avoided her gaze. She accepted both without comment. She stopped in front of her grandfather's portrait. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then quietly, "I didn't plan for this." The painted eyes did not judge her. They never had. Robert Caldwell joined her cane, tapping softly against the floor. "None of us plan for the moments that define us." Emily glanced at him. "Do you think this will change anything Caldwell considered?" "Change is slow, but it has a way of compounding." She nodded. Her phone buzzed. A text from Eleanor. "Board meeting tomorrow. Emergency session. Your presence requested." Emily read it twice. She felt tired down to her bones. But beneath the exhaustion, something else stirred. Resolve. Purpose. The understanding that this chapter wasn't ending. It was turning. At home that night, Margaret cooked dinner they barely touched. They sat at the small kitchen table, hands wrapped around mugs gone cold, the television muted in the background as headlines scrolled past. "People will start saying your name," Margaret said quietly. Some kindly, some not. Emily shrugged. "They already are." Margaret reached across the table. "I need you to hear something. You don't owe anyone perfection." Emily met her eyes. "I know. But you'll try anyway," Margaret added. Emily smiled faintly. "Probably." Later alone in her room, Emily lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought of the federal room, the recorder, the questions, the weight of speaking truth into systems built to absorb and deflect it. She thought of the people who would never know her name, but might feel the consequences of what had started. Her phone buzzed again, a message from an unknown number. "Thank you for saying what we couldn't." Emily stared at the screen for a long time. Then she typed back. "I didn't say it alone." Outside, the night settled over the neighborhood, quiet and ordinary. Somewhere across the city, decisions were being made in rooms far larger than the one Emily had sat in that morning. But tonight she allowed herself one small luxury. She slept. The emergency board meeting convened at 9 sharp, and this time no one pretended it was business as usual. Emily entered the room without ceremony. No cameras, no reporters, just the long mahogany table, the familiar leather chairs and faces that now looked older, tighter, more cautious. Power always aged people once it realized it could bleed. Eleanor Whitman stood as Emily took her seat. Let the record reflect that Emily Parker is present in her capacity as representative of the Parker Family Trust. No objections followed, not a single one. The silence felt different now. Not dismissive, accountable. Daniel Pierce slid a stack of documents down the table. The audit findings are complete. He did not embellish. He did not soften. Numbers did the work for him. Funds rerouted. Committees fabricated. Votes misrepresented. Years of quiet manipulation laid bare in black ink. William Hawthorne's chair remained empty. Emily listened without interrupting. She had learned that truth carried more weight when allowed to speak uninterrupted. Around her board, members shifted, some pale, some rigid, some staring down at their hands, as if they might confess on their own. Eleanor cleared her throat. Before we proceed, Emily has asked to address the board. Every eye turned. Emily stood slowly. She did not grip the table. She did not raise her voice. She simply spoke. I didn't come here to punish anyone, she said. I came here because my family trusted this institution to honor its word. She paused, letting that settle. My grandfather believed this place mattered because it was supposed to be fair when the world wasn't. Somewhere along the way, comfort replaced conscience, silence replaced responsibility. She looked around the room, meeting each gaze in turn. I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in repair. No one laughed. No one scoffed. Eleanor nodded once. Then let's begin. Motions followed, swift, unambiguous, suspension made permanent, referrals approved, restitution plans outlined, structural safeguards rewritten so no trust could be sidelined by convenience again. Emily voted when required, abstained when appropriate, learned the weight of each decision in real time. By noon, it was done. Outside, the press waited, patient and relentless. Emily stepped out beside Eleanor and Margaret, the sunlight sharp, unforgiving. Microphones rose. Cameras whirred to life. Emily raised a hand. I'll make a brief statement, she said. Her voice carried calm and clear. My name is Emily Parker. I came forward to protect my family's legacy, but what happened here is bigger than me. It's about what happens when institutions stop listening and start assuming. She did not name Hawthorne. She did not need to. Accountability isn't about humiliation, she continued. It's about making sure the same harm doesn't happen again. She stepped back. No questions taken. That afternoon, resignations followed. Some quiet, some public. Statements issued, alliances broken. A system began the slow, painful work of correcting itself. Weeks passed. Investigations expanded. Charges formalized. Settlements negotiated. Hawthorne's name faded from club stationery, and letterhead replaced by footnotes and legal filings. Power once exposed had nowhere to hide. Emily returned to her life in increments. School, work, evenings at the small kitchen table with Margaret, where conversations drifted back to ordinary things. Groceries, weather, a neighbor's dog that barked too much. One evening, Margaret slid a small envelope across the table. What's this? Emily asked. Margaret smiled. A letter. Inside, handwritten, shaky but deliberate, were words from Robert Caldwell, written days before his passing. Gratitude, pride, an apology for not speaking sooner. Emily folded the letter carefully and pressed it to her chest. The club held a quiet ceremony that spring. No fanfare, no speeches, just a plaque installed near the entrance bearing Henry Parker's name and a single line beneath it. Founding member, advocate for fairness. Emily stood before it alone after the others left. "You were right," she whispered. "It takes time, but it matters." Life moved forward, slowly, inevitably. Emily learned that courage didn't arrive fully formed. It built itself, moment by moment, choice by choice. She learned that systems could change, but only when people were willing to stand long enough for the truth to catch up. And she learned something else, something quieter, but just as powerful. That being believed was not a gift. It was a responsibility. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like this video, subscribe for more stories where truth stands its ground, and comment 3 words below. Truth still matters.